So finally, we get to our last couple of groups in our diversity unit. We've made our way all the way from our prokaryotes to our protists and eukaryotes, through our plants, through our fungi, through our animal kingdom, and we finally get to our last remaining groups, the reptiles, which include birds, and the mammals. Our reptiles include organisms like turtles, lizards, snakes, crocodilians, and of course, birds. So there are 4 modern groups. We have the testudines, the turtles, the squamata, the lizards and snakes, crocodilia, and then the aves. We are specifically going to focus on the birds that come out of the reptile lineage. And remember that dinosaurs are reptiles as well. Birds specifically come out of the dinosaur lineage, which is part of the reptile lineage. But of course, all the dinosaurs have become extinct. So of the dinosaur lineage, birds are the only ones that are left. You all know that feathers are a defining characteristic of birds, and they allow nearly all of our birds to fly. There are a few species that don't fly, but feathers are just an outgrowth of the epidermal layer. So they grow out of the layer of skin, just like you have hair growing out of your skin. It is thought that, based on fossil evidence, that feathers were derived in the dinosaur lineage and then maintained through the bird lineage. And this is due to fossil examples like the Archaeopteryx. We've seen this one several times. We talked about this as a transitional feature or a transitional fossil, but this is a transitional fossil specifically for birds to dinosaurs, linking those 2 groups and suggesting that birds evolved out of that dinosaur lineage. So in this fossil, we can see an indication of feathers here. On one of the previous slides in one of my lectures, there's a cartoon image or a drawing, not really a cartoon, a drawing of what they think Archaeopteryx looked like. It was a small dinosaur, probably the size of a chicken or so. Those feathers that are epidermal outgrowths are different than any of our other flying vertebrates. The other vertebrates that fly, like bats, have skin that is stretched basically across from their shoulder down to their fingertips. So it's skin that allows them to fly rather than the feathers. Along with the feathers, birds have a whole slew of adaptations that make them lightweight and allow them to fly. So of course, birds have feathers. As we said on the previous slide, they are epidermal outgrowths. They're basically scales. So if you think about reptiles' scaly skin, feathers are scales that have evolved into these outgrowths that are shaped like feathers. They do 2 things. They keep birds warm because birds are flying at really high altitudes. They need to stay warm. If they don't stay warm, they can't generate enough energy. And also, of course, enable them to fly. They also have special air sacs in their lungs, which allow for more efficient breathing so that they can get all of the oxygen that they need as they are flying. Many of their organs are smaller or reduced. So for example, birds only have 1 ovary instead of 2, and they also don't have a bladder. So they don't produce urine. They basically produce a paste that is both liquid and solid waste. Birds lack teeth, so they're not chewing any of their prey. But they do have a variety of beak shapes to help them gather their food. So whether that is nuts or a prey animal, they can rip their prey, they can break open nuts, whatever it happens to be. And then they also have thin, lightweight bones. So their bones are thin and hollow and basically honeycomb shaped, basically filled with little air pockets that make them more lightweight in order for them to fly higher. They also are warm-blooded, which is unusual for reptiles. Usually reptiles are cold-blooded. Birds are going to be warm-blooded, which is going to allow them to have a higher metabolic rate. Sorry, my pen seems to not be working. I was trying to write higher metabolic rate to go along with their flying to help sustain their flying. There we go. So high metabolic rate. And this is going to allow them to have more energy for flight. Flying is going to be really energy draining. They're going to need to be able to produce a lot of energy in a short period of time to maintain that flight. They also have acute vision. So if they're flying high, they need to be able to locate prey. They need to be able to see really well to not fly into things. So many of them, especially the prey species, have really fantastic vision. So finally, we get to mammals. Many of you have favorite animals that are mammals. Many of you have cats and dogs. You yourself are mammals. Mammals are milk-producing amniotes. So reptiles and birds are amniotes, but mammals are milk-producing amniotes. They are named for mammary glands, which are the milk-producing glands that we see in our mammals. So mammals actually diverged from an amnio ancestor much earlier than birds diverged in their reptile lineage. Mammals appeared about 225 million years ago. And we talked about the KT event, the dinosaur extinction. We talked about that actually in one of our plant lectures. And we said that the KT event, which was triggered by the asteroid crashing into the Yucatan Peninsula that killed pretty much anything that was larger than, say, a mouse or a squirrel, killed most of or all of the dinosaurs, most of the reptiles, and basically what were left were small mammals and insects. So mammals started out as nocturnal, very small creatures that basically filled all of the niches that were left empty by dinosaurs when they became extinct. There's a tremendous variety of size and body forms in our mammals. So if you think about our insects, we said our insects account for the majority of the identified species on Earth, but they have only a very few body types. They might be modified a little bit, but our mammals are super distinct, wide variety of shapes and sizes. And if you just think about a variety of mammals, you're going to come up with a whole range of those different body types. I am not going to ask you to know all of the orders of animals. If you are interested, there's a table in your textbook, table 27.2, that tells you the main characteristics of each of the orders. Again, I'm not going to test on that, but it is there if you would like it. You are all probably well aware of the key features of mammals. The first, as I mentioned, their namesake, the mammary glands. These are organs in the female that secrete milk to provide sustenance for their newborns. We'll talk about the different major types of mammals in just a minute, but one of the key characteristics is that they feed their newborns milk. All mammals also have hair. Hair provides several different functions. The main one is that it is an insulator to maintain body heat. So mammals are what we call endothermic, meaning they produce their own heat. So mammals can maintain their body temperature regardless of the outside temperature. So this is different from our reptiles and our amphibians that are going to be cold-blooded. Fish are going to be cold-blooded. Birds, although they are reptiles, do happen to be warm-blooded based on some adaptations that they have acquired mostly related to flight. But hair does a few other things. They can act as sort of a sensory organ. So if you think about whiskers on a cat, or even these structures here on this walrus called vibrissae, they're basically hairs that act as sensory organs. Um, Hair can act as camouflage. So we've got an example up here at this lynx that is camouflaged within the trees that he's hiding, and then hair can also act as defense. So we've got a porcupine here, and you're probably aware that porcupine can basically shoot their quills, which are just modified hairs, as a defense mechanism, and they have sharp points on the end. Mammals also have specialized teeth. The only other organisms we talked about with teeth really are the chondrichthyans, the sharks. Mammals have teeth that are embedded in their jaw. They have a variety of specialized teeth that do all kinds of different things. Incisors, which are the front flat teeth in your mouth. Incisors are for basically pulling or tearing. Canines are for grabbing and biting. So you can see canines on this wolf here, and then you can also see the flat incisors there. Humans don't have very prominent canines because we're not really grabbing and tearing our meat. Premolars and molars are for chewing. So your mouth has some of all of these. These are to help you be an omnivore, basically eat a variety of food. But if you look at different types of mammals, they all have different types of teeth. So for example, we've got a lot of molars. This is probably a horse or a cow, something similar. They have basically a whole range of just really big molars and large premolars, if they even have premolars at all. There's also gnawing teeth. So we've got this beaver here. They, along with other rodents, use their large front teeth to gnaw. Some teeth are actually modified for protection. So we've got tusks on this elephant that are used for defense or used for combat. Then, of course, we've got some different kind of teeth down here on this bottlenose dolphin. These are grasping teeth. These are basically just little tiny pointy teeth that allow the dolphin to grab onto their prey, and then they just kind of swallow a chunk. Mammals also have an enlarged skull relative to their body size. This is to help protect much larger brains. So relative to body size, mammals have much larger brains, which also means that most of our more intelligent animals are going to be mammals. So when we think about our really intelligent animals, we've got several on this slide here. They're almost always mammals. Dolphins are really smart. Elephants are really smart. Of course, humans are very, very smart. And many of these mammals can perform learned behaviors. So you can train a dog, you can train a cat, you can train a rat. Other organisms are trainable or conditionable, but not to the level of mammals. And that's because of that relatively large brain compared to their body. Their enlarged skull also has a single lower jawbone. This is going to allow for a wider range of diet and to accommodate different types of teeth. You can feel your lower jawbone. It moves, whereas the rest of your head stays still. So this is going to help with your chewing. And then that enlarged skull also has 3 separate bones in the middle ear, which is going to allow for much better hearing. So there are 3 major clades or groups of mammals. The first one is called the Prototheria. We would know them as the monotremes. There are not very many monotremes. There's only a few species that we have identified. One is the platypus. So I believe there's only one species of platypus. There may be two. There's only a couple species of echidnas. You can see the echidna on the right-hand side here. It kind of looks like a hedgehog had a baby with an anteater. The monotremes are characterized by laying eggs. So they lay eggs, their embryos develop in the eggs, and then they hatch. Because they are laying eggs outside of their body, they don't have a placenta. They have poorly developed nipples, but because they are mammals, they do feed their young milk. The word prototheria actually means first breast. So they basically have sort of underdeveloped first breasts compared to the other organisms. Our second group are called the Metatheria. This name comes from or means changed breast. So they are a bit more developed than the prototherians, but not quite as developed as our last group. Marsupials were once widespread, but are now mostly confined to Australia and surrounding islands, New Zealand, Tasmania. There is one type of marsupial in North America, that is the opossum, but everyone else is sort of located to the area in and around Australia. We've got some examples on the right-hand side of common marsupials. We've got a wombat over here, a kangaroo, and a koala down here on the bottom. And then over here on the left-hand side, we have the North American opossum. And then we've also got a Tasmanian devil. So these are some common marsupials. The characteristic that we know of from marsupials is that their young develop in a pouch. So in this kangaroo here, we've got its baby, which we would call a joey. And basically the babies are birthed live, and then they crawl into the mother's pouch, and then they continue to develop in the pouch, and they mostly stay in the pouch until they are fully developed and then leave the pouch and move on. So these marsupials, again, they are feeding their young milk. The nipples would be inside the pouch where the babies can get to them, and they are characterized by that development in the pouch. Our last group are the Eutheria, which comes from the phrase true breasts. And these are the organisms that you're going to be most familiar with as mammals. These are the placental mammals. So the embryo develops inside the mother's uterus with a placenta for nourishment. So the placenta is essentially the equivalent of the yolk in the amniotic egg, and it provides all of the nutrients that that baby is going to need until it is born. Eutherian or placental mammals tend to have a prolonged gestation. What this means is a prolonged development time. So some of the longest development times are going to be in our mammals, especially our larger mammals. This image here on the right shows some of the average gestation periods compared to the lifespan of the organism. So on the right-hand side, we have their average lifespan. On the left-hand side, we have their average gestation period. And you can see the larger the animal, so for example, at the bottom, we've got the whale and the elephant, the longer their gestation period. This is a trade-off because gestation lasts for a very long time. It is very energetically expensive, requires a lot of energy. But that internal gestation, where the organism is basically not born until it is fully developed, greatly increases its chance of survival. So in our mammals, we also tend to see a lot. Of maternal and paternal care, caring for the young, spending a lot of energy to ensure the survival of those organisms. And mammals tend to have less numbers of offspring than many of our other invertebrate and non-mammalian animals. And again, this is a trade-off. They don't have as many offspring, but they do tend to survive and invest more energy in them surviving.